5, 4, 3.
The Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, episode 816 for Monday, May 25th, 2020.
And welcome to the Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, the show where you send in your questions, your tips, your cool stuff found. We mix them all together into an agenda, and we take that agenda and we sort of loosely base the show on it. Let's be quite frank. When things come up, we like to take little tangents and explore things because the goal is for each and every one of us to learn at least 5 new things. And so that takes precedence over everything. Sponsors for this episode include expressvpn.com/mgg, purple.com/mgg, Otherworld Computing at macsales.com, and linode.com/mgg. We'll talk more about those as usual throughout the show. For now, as usual, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Braun.
How you doing today, Mr. John F. Braun?
As well as can be expected.
That's good. I hope you have a good weekend and day and all of that good stuff. I hope everybody does. It's we're all rooting for each other, right? That's what we do. And what better way to root for each other than to share a couple of quick tips, shall we, John? We'll start with listener Jeff. I love these things that we learn about, and Jeff brings one to us. He says, I often press Command-Shift-4 to make a screenshot. The little crosshair pops up to start the selection, and sometimes I don't get it quite right. I used to just finish anywhere, delete the file, and start again. Did you know? And the answer is no, I didn't. That if you keep the mouse button pressed in while selecting, then hold the space bar, this allows you to reposition your selection on the fly to exactly where you want it. So you hit Command-Shift-4 or Command-Control-Shift-4, Command-Option-Shift-4, Command-Control-Shift-4, I think, puts it on the clipboard. Command-Shift-4 saves it to the disk. But either one brings up the crosshair. You do the little crosshair deal. And then if you realize, it's not quite right, you hold down the space bar, and now moving the mouse actually drags the whole selection window around. It's a pretty cool thing. It's one of those things you have to do it a couple times. So you're dragging and holding the mouse button down. You're keeping the mouse button down because when you release it is when it takes the screenshot. And then while still holding the mouse button down, you hold the space bar down. Now you can drive the whole selection window around the screen. So I like that one. I will use that routinely if I can get my fingers to remember how to do it, John. But that's how that goes, right?
Nice.
Yeah, I thought so. All right. Shall we move on to Peter?
Sure.
All right. Peter, another one. I love these things. He said that you can rearrange your columns in the Finder. So if you're like me and you like to use the Finder's column view, I guess, is that what they call it? They call it list view, I guess. Right? Yeah, it's list view as list. So go to view as list. You can rearrange the order in which columns appear here. I had no idea that you could change the order. I knew you could change the size, the width of them, but I didn't know you could just drag the order around by grabbing the header and moving it. And then it will remember that, at least on my machine it does, remember that for the next time you come back to this particular window, which is pretty cool. So I'm sure there's scenarios where that's not true and it doesn't remember it because it's the Finder and things get weird, but that's okay.
Right. And of course, you knew if you right click, it lets you add or delete columns. I
did not know that. I always did that by going to view, show view options, I want to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing.
No, it is. I had no idea you could right click and just choose them there. It makes perfect sense. See, look at that. The bonus quick tip. I like it. I'm already at 3 things, John. It's great. More We got some cool
sure.
stuff. I don't have any more quick tips. Actually, we have one, but we're saving it for later because it ties in with a question we kind of want to keep topically. We want to apply it topically. And I meant that. Patrick has a cool stuff found for us, Mr. Braun. Patrick says, have you guys looked at using GoldenChaos with BetterTouchTool? It does crazy things to the control strip. It's a little complex, but it makes the control strip worthwhile. I don't have a Mac with a control strip right now, John, but I know someone that does. And that someone is you. Have you messed with this GoldenChaos thing?
No.
Dude, it looks cool. There's all kinds of things that you can add to the touch bar there. Widget groups, dynamic menu bars, modal widgets that appear at certain times, dock badges you can move to the bar. This looks really cool. So if you have a Mac with a touch bar, I would, if I had a Mac with a touch bar, I would use this, or at least I would play with using it. So there you go. I highly recommend checking it out, even though I can't, but I can look at the screenshots and get obviously very excited about it. So yeah, good. Anything, Mr. Braun? Any thoughts on that?
Nope. No, I do have to explore my touch bar in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Though what it does already, I kind of like.
Yes, I found that when I was testing those Macs with the touch bar, it was, it's a new thing, right? So it's not part of your normal workflow, and you got to kind of get there with it. So yeah, cool. It's worth taking some time. All right, another cool stuff found. I suppose we'll call this one, and that is from Zach. Zach points out two great little terminal commands: pbcopy and pbpaste. And pbcopy, according to the manual page in the terminal, takes whatever you feed to it on the standard input. So it could be the result of a command or something like that, and puts it on the clipboard. And then when you use pbpaste, it slurps it back out and spits it back out to standard output. So you could use these together, or you could use them so if you've got some script or something that does a thing and you happen to be using the terminal for it, you could spit that out to the clipboard. And now you can use the clipboard any way you want, like, with Command V somewhere else in the GUI part of the app. The clipboard is common to both. So I thought that was pretty cool. Have you ever used pbcopy or pbpaste, John?
No. It's interesting that it's PB. Yeah, at first I read that and I'm like, PB, pasteboard.
Pasteboard, that's right. Yeah.
I guess is another term that some have used for the clipboard.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. All right, I've got two cool stuffs found, John. The first is a thing, and it is the Eggtronic Power Bar. And what the Eggtronic Power Bar is it's a wireless power brick, essentially. It's a battery, right? And it's got a USB-C port on it for both charging in and up to 30 watt power delivery out. So that's cool. And then it's got two Qi pads on it for your phone, right? Or, whatever you want to use them for. And then it's got a watch charger on it. And what's cool is they're all on kind of the top of it. And if your watch would just lay on it, great, then you use it. Or you can raise up the watch thing. And I've actually been able to fit, my cloth band underneath it because I've got one of those loop bands or whatever on my watch currently. So the two Qi pads on it are 7.5 watt. So they'll do the Apple fast charging and, all of that stuff. And like I said, 30 watt USB power delivery out. So, and it's a 10,000 milliamp hour battery. I think they're charging $150 for it. So not entirely, cheap, but these things generally are not if they're built well. And I've been testing this one. I'm impressed with it. So it's pretty cool. When we can travel again, I will like to have this with me because it's a good, bedside table thing. I hate having to fish around for an outlet. I mean, look, I would love to being back in the scenario where I had to fish around for an outlet because I would love to travel again. But I don't like to have to fish around for an outlet if I don't have to. And oftentimes near the bed, things get weird, with where the outlets are, if they don't have USB ports in like the radio or the lamp or the clock or whatever it is. So I like to bring a power bar with me, and I just charge that during the day wherever power is convenient, usually on the desk. And then at night I bring it over, and this one with the watch thing in it is great. I just pop them all together and charges my phone, and I could charge my iPad out the power delivery port and all that good stuff. So USB-C to Lightning, and I'm good to go because my iPad's still Lightning. So good. Yeah.
It's good to have at least one. I always bring at least one honking large battery. During my travels. Yeah. It's good to have. I agree with that. And now I love that we have laptops now that can be charged from a battery. That is, to me, is key. I freaking love it. It's awesome. All right. Another one is called SoundID. And this is from SonarWorks, who are the folks that have been building. Well, and this background is important. They've been building things to help recording studios, either pro studios and like home studios, get their sound, their speakers and their environments down to what's called a reference level for years, so that that the sound coming out of your speakers is what is being sent to them and not being colored by the speakers, or what your environment is doing and all of that. And they've spent, I think more than a decade sort of working that out, profiling all kinds of different things. Well, they've now delivered that to us as a consumer, not from the recording studio side, but from the music listening side. And in fact, they've learned quite a bit about how people, because most of us wouldn't actually like to hear things at reference level. That's a flat EQ, and it's usually not a thing that sounds good to us, quite frankly. It's good when you're mixing audio in a studio so that you kind of have a flat, neutral response, but most of us like to have a little bit of coloration. So what this does is it's an iOS app. You plug in your headphones, you wear your headphones, however you're doing that, wirelessly or wired. And it then it plays some things for you and asks you which you like better. And you develop like your own sound fingerprint, right? Your own sound profile, and you can tweak it. Over time, you can then do a hearing test as well with it, not for like medical reasons, although the results might tell you, if you want to like visit this further with, say, your audiologist or something, but mostly to get that music listening experience to where you want it. And what's great is it can move from your fingerprint can move with you from device to device. So you can have it on your iPhone. They have a Mac app now. And so you can, once it helps you figure out what your sound ID is, your sound profile is, then it can kind of, take this with you everywhere, which is cool. Once you know how you like music, then it's nice to just have music sound like that for you everywhere. So it's a pretty cool little thing. It's worth checking out. I've been messing with it for a little while here, and both on iOS and on my Mac. So there you go. Cool stuff found. SoundID from SonarWorks. So. Nice. Fun stuff. Doesn't the music app on either platform have equalizer somewhere?
It has equalizers, but that's not the whole thing. And it's up to you.
I was asking about the built-in Mac app. So they have, it sounds like this is like a smart equalizer. So it's creating a sound profile, similar to what you do when you move the little levers up and down on the equalizer. But last I checked, music has one.
It does.
So I don't think it shows it by default. But if you want to, fiddle with it, though it sounds like, this is a smarter option.
It's a smarter way. Yeah, it does it. It does it based on what you actually like to hear, not based on what you think you like to see on an EQ curve. Right. So it's just asking you questions like, oh, okay. And it's kind of like when you go to the eye doctor and they ask you, is A better or B better? And you're just kind of listening, and it narrows it down and comes up with this profile for you, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I'm actually very impressed by it. So, yeah, cool. One last cool stuff found. This is for our Synology using friends from listener Neal. And it is that Backblaze now supports the Amazon S3 protocol. And why that's important to Synology users is Amazon S3 is Amazon's storage solution, for lack of a more detailed term. And there is a way, a protocol, an API that you can use to send data to it and get data from it. And Backblaze has added that API to their backup platform, which means you can get Backblaze's pricing connecting via anything that supports the Amazon S3 protocols. And Synology's HyperBackup supports the Amazon S3 protocols, so we don't have to wait for Synology to decide whether or not they want to support Backblaze in this way. You just can do it, and you're good to go. So that's pretty exciting, I think. So I wanted to share it. Neal wasn't sure if that was, if that hit the 20% mark, because we have the 20% mark. We like to look at our questions and tips and stuff and be like, well, does it resonate for at least 20% of the audience? If so, it goes in the show. I think this one probably does, knowing how many of you have followed us down the Synology rabbit hole. So, yeah, good. Cool EO. All right. You know what I want to do, John, is I want to take a minute and talk about our first two sponsors, if that's okay with you.
Awesome.
All right. Our first sponsor here is Otherworld Computing at MacSales.com. You know that Otherworld Computing is the place that we go when we want to add things to our Macs. Well, we've been talking a lot about adding drives, and we've been talking about Thunderbolt and USB-C and which time is best for both. And OWC has been busy because they doubled the storage by shipping their 4 terabyte NVMe SSDs. And so what that means is that the very popular, and we talk about it all the time here, the Envoy Pro EX, both the Thunderbolt 3 and the USB-C versions, now max out at 4 terabytes instead of 2 terabytes before. And we love these drives. Like, I've got one literally right in front of me here. It is the external drive that I have on my studio computer here. It's the one that we are recording this episode to right now. It is my work drive, right? It's the thing that's got everything, and it's super fast. It's like, 2,400 megabytes a second and all of that great stuff. So they've doubled the size. The max size is now 4 terabytes. And of course, that's not just where it ends. They've gone from an 8 terabyte max up to a 16 terabyte max on their ThunderBlade and Accelsior 4M2. Man, it's crazy. Do you ever think we'd be using this much storage? I know you didn't. I didn't. It's how it goes, but we use it. Thankfully, OWC has it. So go check them out, MacSales.com. Check out those Envoy Pro EX drives, the Thunderbolt 3 and USB-C. They're some of our favorites here, so you gotta check it out. Our thanks to Otherworld Computing at MacSales.com for sponsoring this episode. Working from home is cool. We can do a lot. Thankfully, we can do a lot. Technology allows us to do so much from our houses. We can, have video calls, and we can host podcasts and all of this stuff. But you can't do everything from your house. Sometimes you need a server. And you don't want to host that server in your house. You want that server to be hosted by people that host servers. And that's where our next sponsor, Linode, comes in. Because when you go to linode.com/MGG, that's where you're going to go to get your server that you need for whatever it is, for your business, even for personal stuff. Because their lowest price server, it starts at $5 a month. You can run a server for an entire month for $5. I do it. I have one of these. It's called a Nanode. I've got one of these running that I do different things with. I mean, it's fully capable. If I wanted to host a huge website on it, well, then I'd pay more because I'd want more capacity. But for, just experimenting and doing things, their Nanode is a great place to start. And then when you need more, you just scale it up. Very cool stuff. That's why we talk about it here. Every server that they have has native SSD storage connected to their 40 gigabit network, industry-leading processors. You get to pick from any of their 10 worldwide data centers. You got to go check this out. Go to linode.com/MGG. Good news, you get a $20 credit added to your account by signing up that way. Yeah, that means you'd get 4 free months of a Nanode server if that's the path you go. Go check it out. Our thanks to Linode at linode.com/MGG for sponsoring this episode. All right, John, let's, I think this is going to be a geek challenge. I don't think we have an answer for Bob, but maybe we do. Bob asks, he says, I've been using PowerPoint as my go-to drawing program for several decades, but not for much longer. I'll be upgrading to a MacBook Pro and Catalina soon, and I don't want to pay Microsoft's monthly fee for something I only use a few times a year. I've tried Keynote, but it's a bit cumbersome, so I'm looking for a relatively simple drawing app to replace what I'm doing inside PowerPoint. I'm hoping someone in the Mac Geek Gab family has some suggestions, and he did. He posted this on our forums too. So if you have any thoughts, please do share them. Yeah, off the top of my, I don't, I do all my graphics work in Pixelmator, but that's not a drawing program. That's a photo editing program. It's cheaper and, in my opinion, way better than Photoshop. So that's why I use Pixelmator. But it's not a drawing program. So I'm curious what folks are using for drawing programs on the Mac. So you can, if you know, send it to us. Either post in the forums. The link will be in the show notes, or email us, right? feedback@macgeekgab.com, John?
I think I heard you say feedback@macgeekgab.com.
Yeah, just in case I wasn't clear, it was feedback@macgeekgab.com. That's correct. So yeah, hopefully we can find Bob and the rest of us a drawing app. I know we've been through this before, but since I don't do drawing, it does not stick for whatever reason. I don't know, man.
Off the top of my head, so one, believe it or not, Preview does have some rudimentary drawing features.
Very,
it's not a drawing program either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But depending on what you're looking to do. Right. Yeah.
And that you can pretty much edit, or, you could load a picture and then clear it and then start drawing. And I think you got to say show markup.
Yeah, it's the markup features. Right. Yep.
Yeah. Another thought I have is, if you're looking for a PowerPoint replacement, and of course that's what Keynote can be for a lot of people.
Totally.
I don't use the Office suite right now, but there's also the Office compatible suites that probably have
true
PowerPoint component. So, LibreOffice or OpenOffice or whatever Office.
LibreOffice definitely has a PowerPoint component. So there's no reason that you couldn't just, and no, that's free. You can go download LibreOffice today for free. So, maybe for what you're doing, Bob, especially if you're more comfortable in PowerPoint, maybe that's the right answer. Oh, good thinking, Mr. Braun. I like it. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. All right. Well, there's some options for you, but hopefully we'll get more. Let's see. There's a couple showing up in the chat room right now, and that is one called Inkscape, John, that we will put in the show notes, which is compatible with Catalina. But it's at inkscape.org. So we will put that in there. Thank you to Kiwi Graham in the chat room at live.macgeekgab.com. Alex has suggested Krita, Krita. It's a professional, free, and open source painting program. So we'll put that in the show notes too. Oh, look at this. And Brian Monroe suggests Autodesk's. That's not how we speak. Autodesk's Sketchbook 4 Plus. So I'll put that there too. Anything else, John?
And Warren, I didn't mention this, but why not? I think there's a Mac native version, but GIMP, or GNU Image Manipulation Program.
Okay. Yep.
Is like kind of, last I checked, kind of a Photoshop.
I thought that was more for photo. Yeah. But I haven't used it. Maybe it's got some drawing stuff in it now. Yeah. Huh. Oh, now I know what my next quarantine project is going to be. Is maybe I'll mess around with drawing on my Macs. So cool. Awesome. All right. We good on this one? Anything more, Mr. Braun?
I think so.
All right, cool. Then let's go to Kevin, who I'll share Kevin's question, but there's a great solution. He says, I began using iMazing to back up my family's phones and iPads after hearing about it on the show. It works flawlessly, but after some time, I found that the backups were consuming almost a third of my MacBook Pro's internal storage. So I created a shared folder on my Synology and copied all of the backup data there. Then I went into Home, Library, Application Support, iMazing, and deleted the backup folder and replaced it with a symlink to the shared folder on my Synology, and the setup works perfectly. He says the backups take a little bit longer, but backup data now is on my Synology and doesn't take up room on my laptop. Great. His question, is this safe? He says, I know that some programs like Photos don't work well over network connections, and the risk of data loss is considerable. Is that the case with iMazing? I browsed their support forums and couldn't find an answer. The space savings on my MacBook Pro is great, but I don't want to get caught. Well, so the answer is, as far as I've been able to experience, no problem putting this on the NAS. But it's even easier than what you did. What you did is fine. Obviously, it works. But iMazing is suited for this. Go to iMazing, go to Preferences, go to Backups, and you can set not only your default backup location, but per backup, you can actually set where you want it to send things. And if you happen to have an archive of backups, you can add that folder to its loaded backup locations list, which is right in that same Preferences dialog. And that way, if you need to restore from a backup, it's always pulling from it's giving you the option to pull from everything out there, which is cool. So yeah, go check the preferences in iMazing. They've done some good stuff there, I think. Anything to add to that, Mr. Braun?
No, it's nice that because those backups can, I remember one time I did a disk scan and it was like tens of gigs.
Yeah.
It can get that large depending on
right
how much you store and how big your phone is and all that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, you want to take us to Douglas, my friend?
Douglas has a head scratcher here.
Okay.
So the question is, I'm trying to help a friend set up his new MacBook Air and migrate his data from his old MacBook Pro. So far, everything has gone fairly smoothly, considering we have to do this by phone and TeamViewer, and also considering besides email and Facebook, my friend is not Mac savvy.
Yes,
the problem he has run into is that there is a particular file that cannot be deleted from the Mac. When he tries to empty the trash, he gets the message shown in screenshots 1 through 4 below. I, of course, want to get info as the pop-up box instructed. Okay. Let's see. I did some searching on Google, and there were some suggestions about rebooting in recovery mode and using the terminal. And actually, I think he was on the right path with that. And yeah, he tried to move it out of the trash and it wouldn't work.
Okay.
All right. So, the dialogue said, what was it complaining about here? Let me find. The operation can't be completed because the item VoiceTrigger is in use.
VoiceTrigger.
And so I took a shot in the dark, Dave, and I'm like, wow, let me pop that into Google and see if anything comes up. And believe it or not, I found an article at Reddit that the title of it was "Cannot Empty Trash Because VoiceTrigger is in Use."
Hey, that sounds like a good path to head down. What was the net of all this?
Basically, if you read through it, and the person claims to have done this and it worked fine, this is something that actually came up, I think, an episode or two ago, Dave, when we were trying to change the NVRAM, and you couldn't. You want to disable system integrity protection is the answer in this case.
Got it.
Then that empty trash should, and we've seen this before too, where you have to it just won't let you delete things. It totally blocks the attempt and gives you some. So I think that's it. And then at that point, so it sounds like what it's doing is it's trying to empty the trash before doing the migration, and it can't. So
got it. Yeah,
so
makes sense.
I guess Migration Assistant gets stuck on that part.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So hopefully, and any other messages you get a lot of times when it's like, permission denied or whatever, which I've run into, disable SIP.
Yeah.
And re-enable it maybe when you're done. Yeah.
I have a feeling that SIP. Oh, no, I guess it's not disabled on either of my Macs right now because I did the roll around thing. But anytime I run, one of those utilities that sort of audits things and checks, it always comes up and it's like, you don't have SIP enabled. It's like, I know I turned it off for a thing and I didn't turn it back on. And so, yeah. I don't know. Alex in the chat room suggests that I think in this scenario, SIP was the answer, but in the chat room suggests try starting up in safe mode and emptying the trash. That can help sometimes, right? So anyway. All right. Shall we move on here? One more with lots of free space to clear up. Gannon brings us, he says, I think Gannon is a he. Apologies if I guessed that wrong. Anyway, Gannon says, I have a Mac Mini with 256 gigs SSD internal. I have a Drobo 5D attached as external storage with my photo library stored on the Drobo. I've noticed my internal Mac storage lower than in the past, so I ran a disk scan using Daisy Disk, and it pointed out 80 plus gigs of data in my user library folder, specifically user library containers, com.apple.cloudphotosd, data, library, application support. He says, I do use iCloud Photo Library and have seen the option of, or I have set the option, download originals to this Mac. Why is there so much photos/iCloud data stored locally on my Mac when the photo library itself is stored externally on the Drobo? What can I do to safely free up that space on my local Mac? So I dug into this, John, and I don't have that folder on my Mac. Specifically on my Mac that's set up very much the same way as Gannon, with my photo library stored on an external drive. Do you have it on yours?
I looked up both my machines and the answer is no. I have things that are named similarly.
Sure.
Like, Cloud Photo, something or other, but not that specific one. So I think I'm thinking what you're thinking.
Wait, go ahead. Yeah,
tell me what you're thinking.
All right. So I'm thinking that this is a holdover from a previous version of Photos. Best case scenario. I mean, it could be some, malware trying to masquerade as Photos. I don't know what malware would be doing, putting 80 gigs of data on your drive, though. The interesting thing is that there is a process called CloudPhotoD that runs currently, at least on Catalina, but nothing called CloudPhotosD, and that's what Gannon's folder was named. So I would do a backup before you blow away 80 gigs of data. By all means, do a backup. But I don't think you're going to see anything using this. Now, another way to check would be to launch, go into Activity Monitor, and you want to, the first thing you want to do is make sure you're looking at all processes. So you do that by going, once you're in Activity Monitor, go to the View menu and choose All Processes. And then from here in the search box, type photo, just photo, no S, and you'll see a bunch of processes running, right, that have to do with photos. And I would do this while you have the Photos app launched as well. You can look at each of these. There'll be like CloudPhotoD, as I mentioned. There'll be Photo Library D. And once you see these, double click on them to bring up sort of the detail box about them. And then the third tab that you'll see is Open Files and Ports. Look there and see. It'll list for you the things that are open and that it's using. And look to see if anything is pointing at this particular store. But not only do I not have that folder, well, I obviously don't have any apps pointing to a non-existent folder here, but I think that's a holdover from an old version of maybe, iPhoto or something like that. So I think you're probably okay blowing it away at this point. Did my thoughts match yours, John?
Yeah, it's a leftover. I mean, you can check the date on it. That would be helpful. Every now and then.
Yeah.
Before I act something, I'll look, and every now and then I'll stumble across something that's like 10 or 15 years old.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I bet you've just got old data. Yeah, which is fine. It happens. All right, John, I promised earlier, or I mentioned earlier, that we had a quick tip that was that we were holding because it sort of flows into a longer discussion about a question. And we liked to pace the show so that we kind of get some, we get some of the hits out of the way quick in the beginning. And then once we're all a little settled, we dig in. Sometimes we get into an extended jam in the beginning. That's okay. But, unless I don't always plan for that. So anyway, here we are. Tigg says, Tigg was having an issue connecting to Macs with Catalina using file sharing. And they just wouldn't connect. Like they would see each other, but not really. And what Tig found was, he says, I opened file sharing in system preferences and unchecked the file sharing box. I then waited for it to like truly shut down file sharing. Then I rechecked the box to start it again. And it changes at that point to using SMB instead of AFP, and doing that process worked. So if anybody's ever running into an issue where Macs won't see each other, the turn it off and turn it on again, but turn it off and truly wait for it to spin down the whole file sharing thing, then turn it back on again, definitely seemed to work for Tig. So that brings us to Larry's question, Mr. Braun.
Larry's question, which is right in front of me.
I think so. It should be.
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on. Here we go.
I've got it if you
All
don't,
right,
but I think you got it.
No, we got it.
Great.
Was just looking at the dialogue. So, just about every time I open my MacBook Pro while my wife is on her iMac, the attached screen pops up asking her to validate my attempt to connect to her machine. I'm not attempting to connect to her machine, and I cannot seem to find a way to stop this. It is very annoying to her, and the problem is threatening the peace within our home. I have tried shutting my machine down, her machine down, actually logging in, and then disconnecting, all to no avail. Can you help? And here's the secret, Larry. So, he sent a screenshot. Now, you all can't see it, but I can see it. And here's what tipped me off as to what is doing this. In the upper left-hand corner of the dialog, there's an icon, and it's a Bluetooth icon. It looks like a B, kind of. And then the wording was connection request from, and the connection request was from the other machine, and then there's some more wording, and it shows a 6-digit number, and then they say make sure that that number is on the other machine, and you can connect the two. So it's a Bluetooth thing. And actually, Larry found a better answer than I had, but I'll give you my answer. So first off, you could, first thing you would want to do here to try to debug this or any Bluetooth problem is go to System Preferences, Bluetooth, and make sure that Show Bluetooth in Menu Bar is checked. Now, if you hold down Option and click on the Bluetooth icon in the menu bar, you should see Send File to Device and Browse Files on Device. And I'm wondering if he had ever done that. I don't think he had. Another thing is that if you run System Information, which you go to the Apple menu and hold down Option, and then that'll launch System Info, look at hardware and Bluetooth, just to see what Bluetooth devices your machine knows about.
Yeah.
Just as a level check. Now, here's the fun part. If you hold down Shift and Option on the Bluetooth menu, you'll now get a debug menu. And we all love debug menus because they let you do things that you shouldn't. No, this lets you so under that is what I think he needs to do. So there's one choice there saying remove all devices, which will basically clear the list of all the things that you just saw in the last step. My thought was that if you do that, then it won't try to connect again. And I think doing that may solve that problem.
Yeah, you just kind of want to give Bluetooth a reset. I like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the, go to Library, Preferences, com.apple.bluetooth.plist and whack it. So that I think is also another way of doing that, though I'd probably do it through the debug menu as well. But then Larry wrote back and
explain to me this debug menu, because I option clicked on the Bluetooth menu on my
shift option.
Ah, that's what I missed. There it is. Aha! Wow. So there is a difference between option click and shift option click.
Shift option click. Yeah.
Look at that. One of my 5 new things. There you go. I like it. Oh, you can. Oh, look at. Oh, yeah. I like this. I don't want to do it right now because I'm relying on Bluetooth greatly. But
But here's what I think was the real issue, Dave, because he wrote back and said, "Okay, I'm going to try the things you suggested." And also, I noticed, and then all of a sudden, the light bulb went on my head. I think this was the issue. He said, I also had some shares defined and I got rid of them. So if you go to System Preferences, sharing, you know what one of the choices is there, Dave?
No.
Bluetooth sharing.
Oh, right.
I had honestly never used that before. So I think he had at one point enabled Bluetooth sharing so that the machines would, whenever it thought it was appropriate, say, hey, there's another machine that I should share with.
Right.
So I think that's what was causing that dialogue to come up. So number one, I don't think I've ever done Bluetooth sharing. So it sounds, it's short range and probably fairly
low bandwidth.
Quick. Maybe not as quick as Wi-Fi, but
definitely not as quick as Wi-Fi. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But and there's also some other good stuff in here that actually I'd forgotten about some of them. Content caching. Look at that.
Oh yeah.
Which is off.
Oh, yeah. I wonder which machine in my house is now doing content caching now that I've rolled everything around. That's an important thing to check. I mean, I don't want to turn it on right now because, I'm doing a thing. But yeah, content caching isn't on this one. I'll have to check and see if it's on in the one downstairs. That can really be helpful for updates when you've got a bunch of Macs and iOS devices. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's right. And your iCloud stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that this came up per the last conversation. We landed in the same place here, but to solve different problems.
Right. So I will. There was one point we were talking about Bluetooth sharing. Jeff Gamet and I were at an event covering an Apple event, and there was Wi-Fi issues. There, like the Wi-Fi was just overcrowded. We were in maybe the overflow room or something. I don't know. But the only way that one of us could get online was using our iPad, I think, that had a cell chip in it, a mobile chip that allowed us to connect. And so we connected, and then it was like, great, now we'll just, Wi-Fi in, do Wi-Fi sharing, internet sharing, if you will, which is done there in the sharing pane. And we couldn't because we were trying to connect over Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi in the room was over congested. It was like, crap, like, how are we going to do this? And, the clock's kicking down, and we're almost at the point where, it's time to go. And I think it was Gamet that thought of it, and he was like, dude, let's use Bluetooth. It's like, aha, right. And Bluetooth sharing between the two devices for the internet was perfect. Now, I'm sure it was low bandwidth, but so was everything else. So it was like it was more bandwidth than Wi-Fi in that scenario, which is all we needed. So yeah, very cool. I like it.
Nice.
Cool. Listener Rob brings us back to a conversation that we had last week about Thunderbolt and Thunderbolt chains and managing things and all of that. And he says, since Thunderbolt seems to be popular for the moment, I wanted to ask about something that crossed my mind while listening. I recently retired my 2012 Mac Mini server to Windows duty and replaced it with a brand new Mac Mini, 2018 Mac Mini, of course. This also allowed me to retire the legendary Thunderbolt display I was using with it. The display was a treat, and I so wish Apple would have just refreshed it with new internals instead of the ridiculous Pro display. I swear Apple did that, and the Mac Pro is an actual insult to those prices, at those prices, but I digress. He says, I also have a 2018 15-inch MacBook Pro, and I remember you discussed things about the order in which you plug things in. That's not quite as important on the 4 Thunderbolt port devices as it is on the 2, but there is a thing. You're right. And if you plug, be aware when you plug Thunderbolt devices in, especially if it's the 2nd or 3rd or 4th device. I think on those machines, it would be probably the 4th device. So if it's the last device filling up a slot, it might not connect at Thunderbolt. So there's that. But he says, my real question surrounds the aforementioned Mac Mini. Do you happen to know if all 4 of the Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports on the Mini share a single Thunderbolt bus, or are they split? If they are split, where does the split occur? I asked because I splurged just a little and picked up the LG 32-inch display. It features Thunderbolt connectivity in addition to HDMI and DisplayPort. No integrated webcam, but given Apple's refusal to put a 1080p or 4K model in even the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, I don't care. I'm with you on that. Yeah, Apple's webcams in their Macs are no bueno. It was as close as I could get to a new version of the Thunderbolt display that doesn't even exist anyway. He says, I'm quite pleased with it so far, and I currently have the display connected directly to the 2018 Mac Mini with a Thunderbolt 3 cable. I also bought an OWC Thunderbolt 3 dock, and it is also connected to the Mac Mini with another cable. All is working well, and I'm very happy. But that's my question. I'm not running the LG display through the Thunderbolt 3 dock. It goes straight to one of the ports on the Mini. The OWC dock is also directly connected, as mentioned. I didn't want to sacrifice any speed, so I thought it was wise to separate them. I'm not sure the LG display is actually rated for Thunderbolt 3 speeds anyway, and even if it mattered, I heard rumors that the Thunderbolt 3 bus on the Mini is split, so I wondered if perhaps I should be using something like port 1 for the dock, then port 3 for the display, if that would make a difference at all. So as far as I understand it, there are 2 Thunderbolt 3 buses on that machine. And yes, they are split in the way that you think, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. That's my understanding. It's also my understanding, though, that power is actually shared amongst both buses. So if you're drawing a lot of power with 1 and 2, it can actually borrow power from the 3 and 4 bus, and that would be fine. Bandwidth wise, though, yes, you want to start to think about this stuff. I would leave it connected the way that you have connected it, because you could plug the display into a dock and daisy chain it that way. That would work. And I believe that display truly is a Thunderbolt display. So it is doing that. But display data is data, just like anything else. And as I've been going through my experiments here, I think I alluded to this last week, like there's, your write speeds of your drives will suffer if they're on the same chain as the display. It's just kind of how it works. Now, you might not have a drive that could max out at those write speeds. It depends on where the bandwidth is allocated and how it's being used and all that stuff. But you are sending data across to that display. So, yeah, you should be thinking about how you're plugging things in. Honestly, the simplest and in my opinion, best way is if you have the ports, and on that Mini, you've got 4, which is awesome. I would do exactly what you're doing. Plug a Thunderbolt 3 dock directly into one, plug the LG display directly into another. And I would split them. If your first one, sure, plug into port 1, your second one, plug into port 3, your third one, 2, your fourth one, 4, right? Like do it that way and just balance it intelligently and test your speeds where it matters, right? If your drive is performing fine, then stack them up so that you can leave some of the, the speed elsewhere. So yeah, I think, so there you go. Yeah, that's it. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. What do you have, John?
Nothing. All my speeds are satisfactory.
Right. That's it. It really, and when we brought up that concept of when USB-C and your Thunderbolt ports falling back to USB-C, especially on the 2-port laptops and all of that, the real trick is you're basically plugging directly into the motherboard, essentially. And it's worth being a little bit diligent about how you're laying that out and do some, like you said, do some testing. If your speeds are satisfactory and everything is working as it should, then you're fine. I do recommend that when you get a new drive, plug it as directly in as is possible and do a test on it. So what the max your computer in that drive can do. And then as you start moving things around, now you have, we always say, make sure you know what normal looks like. Well, now, when you plug everything and you get it all plugged in the way you want because it's more convenient, run a test. And if you're hitting your quote unquote normal speeds, well, then you're good to go. And if you're not, well, now and you can rethink and, but it's like That Mini is awesome because it's got 4 ports. This iMac that I have, it's the current 2019 iMac. I think it's due to be replaced by Apple, but not mine, but the model line. But at the moment, the current iMac, and it's only got 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and I'm going to have a problem up here because I'm adding a Thunderbolt USB or a Thunderbolt audio interface to replace USB, so we get lower latency and better performance. But that and a Thunderbolt drive ends my bus. So I got to be really careful about how I chain these things and where I put them. And it requires a lot of diligence. And it brings me to the thought, like, should I be using Thunderbolt drives up here, or should I be using only USB, maybe 10 gig USB drives so that I have more options and I'm not, terminating a Thunderbolt chain? So I don't know. That's a lot to think about, John. But we're geeks. We like thinking about it. Speaking of, any more thoughts before we move on to Tony?
No, that's the external drives that I have, the cable and the enclosure get to the maximum speed of the particular drives.
That's great.
Once I get more drives, like, direct Thunderbolt drives, maybe that won't be the case. But yeah, for now, I get, 500 megabytes a second, and I'm like, okay, that's good enough.
Yeah, my problem is when I this OWC drive that I said that I've got here in front of me, like it does 2,400 megabytes a second. Now, do I need that kind of speed for what I'm doing? Sometimes, yeah. Like right now, we're recording video to it, so like I guess I don't know, but I like it. I like knowing that I have lots of headroom when I'm recording audio. If I've got we're doing this. There's a secret project in the works, John, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But it involves people and so I've got this Logic project going, and it has like 35 tracks in it or something. And if I was trying to run that from a slow spindle drive, Logic would yell at me. So it's nice to have extra speed. It's good. All right. Yes. One more question. Well, and then more, because that's what we do. Tony says, we have all covered tirelessly on using two-factor authentication when authenticating into websites and services from a browser or application. However, I think we need to discuss two-factor authentication at the device/OS level. There does not appear to be any inherent method to perform two-factor authentication when logging in or booting up my Mac. We are pretty much relying on just a single password to protect our machines. If someone gets physical access and figures out the password, we're toast. I found some third-party solutions out there, but they aren't free and are more designed for enterprise level. I understand that File Vault is there to encrypt our disks, but once you authenticate, macOS logs you in directly and decrypts the disk. I do have a YubiKey, he says, that I use as a 2FA token for various websites and services, but there isn't a way that I can see to use this device as a second factor when booting and logging in. They do offer a way to use this token as another method for authentication, but not as an additional method, just as a supplemental. In other words, you can either use this key token or your password when logging in, but not both in conjunction to protect your machine. This concern would hold true for the iPhone as well. Absolutely right. We only authenticate with a single PIN when booting up, and this would be a good opportunity for Apple to offer Touch ID or Face ID as a second factor. There must be some technical reason they haven't already offered this as an option, presumably. What are your thoughts? So I love this question. This is great because in general, and you're right about this, Apple's Touch ID, Face ID, their biometrics have been employed for convenience, not for security. Now, making security more convenient, therefore makes our devices more secure. Because if you were like me before we had, Touch ID or Face ID, I didn't have a password on my iPhone, or if I did, it was set to, don't ask me for it except at once every, 4 hours or 4 days or whatever the longest stretch I could go with, because it was inconvenient. But adding Touch ID or Face ID changed the convenience level. And so now most of us use a passcode on our phones, which is great. On our Macs, our passcodes exist, but we don't really use them. We can have our machines auto log in. Again, all about convenience. And Apple doesn't have two-factor authentication anywhere. They call it two-factor, but that thing where when you're logging in and you log in on a Mac and it says, is it really you? And it says, I'm going to display a thing on your Macs. Well, or on your iPhone, it'll display it on the same device. That's not two factors. That's two steps because you're not changing to a different thing, right? So that's not another factor. That's just another step. It hopefully is secure, but because you've logged in on that device before, it sends it there because that device is attached to your Apple ID. And I get it, right? It is about convenience first, not security. But again, Apple is a consumer-focused company. I don't know that they care to make it more difficult. So I think you're right, but I don't know that I have an answer for you, but it is a good topic. What do you think, John?
Well, I've been noticing more vendors taking it on themselves. Like you probably, as I did, got an email from Nest saying, "Hey, we're going to enforce what we're going to call two-factor authentication."
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess they email you a code.
Yeah.
The other thing is that when YubiKey was mentioned, because I had actually set up my YubiKey. So I have, I think, the YubiKey 5 NFC.
Okay.
Which is a USB device. So I had to connect it using a dongle to both my machines or to a dock dongle. But I seem to recall when I was setting it up, they were like, okay, you can set this up in an and or an or mode. And I chose the or mode because I didn't see the problem with enforcing two-factor authentication is what if you lose one of the factors?
That's correct.
And I think the way it's set up, if you insist that I have to log in with both a password and a token, and well, you can't really lose your password. You could forget what it is. But if you lose your token,
you're done. Yeah.
So I would double check their steps. I think you have to use a different program from them in order to enforce.
Interesting.
Always using two factors. But again, consider that decision carefully.
Yeah. Well, I was on, I think it was one of the Mac Break weeklies that I did with Leo Laporte. That particular day, he had left his YubiKey at his house. And he uses it for his password authentication. I think Leo is still using LastPass. I mean, he's sort of tied in with them. But it was like, he couldn't log into anything because, he could log into his Mac. Like, thankfully, that was there, I think. But maybe not. He might have had it set that he couldn't even log into his Mac. But he definitely couldn't, unlock his LastPass. That was just not an option. And he was like, I guess maybe I need to send somebody to my house to get it. And this and the other thing. This is you're absolutely right. That be careful which path you choose. Do so with intention. Alex in our chat room says it isn't two-factor, for lack of a better term, actually the T2 chip. And I suppose there is some level of that, right? Because the T2 chip ties that drive to the Mac. So if the drive is taken out, it's useless in another computer. But the T2 chip doesn't protect me from myself. If in the example that Tony pointed out, if somebody gets access to my machine and knows my password, well, they're good to go. Just like I am, right? That's the issue, is how inconvenient do you want to make it? Because as inconvenient as you make it for somebody else, well, you now live with that. And I think your point brings that really straight home. Hopefully you don't leave it at home, or hopefully it's always at home. I don't know. Which one is it, John? I don't know. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. We got some other tips and questions and all that good stuff. The next thing that I want to do, though, Mr. Braun, is I want to talk about our next two sponsors, if that's okay by you.
Excellent.
All right. Look, you've heard us talk about how important it is to have a VPN. And now that we're all working from home, well, it's even more important to choose a VPN that you trust. Now, we do our research here on our sponsors, and we really do our level best to only recommend things and brands that we believe in and frankly that we use ourselves. And that's why I'm really happy to have ExpressVPN on board as a sponsor, because they are the VPN that I use when I'm doing stuff on my Mac, my iPhone, my iPad. It just works. And that's part of why I like them, right? Because it's like one button and it's on. Good to go. Another reason that I like them is that ExpressVPN doesn't log my data. A lot of the cheap and free VPNs, they make their money by selling your data to ad companies. Well, ExpressVPN said no. They developed a tech called TrustedServer that actually makes it impossible for their servers to log any of your info. They all run from like a setup that can't be written to. So there's no place for your data to go. They just run the server. That's it. And it's super fast, right? Speed's important, and ExpressVPN knows how to make their VPN fast. And so they've done that. That's just how it is. It's always blazing fast. You can stream HD videos with zero lag. It just works, right? So protect yourself with the VPN that we use and trust here by using our link. It's expressvpn.com/MGG. Do that today, and you get an extra 3 months for free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/MGG. One more time with feeling. expressvpn.com/MGG is where you go to learn more. Our thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this episode. We all know that technology has improved just about everything that we use, right? Phones, cars, shopping. We're doing a lot of that these days. Well, here's something that you can go check out, because mattresses have more or less been the same since the invention of sleep. But we deserve better, and finally, the mattress has evolved thanks to Purple. And the secret to Purple is this Purple grid. Okay, it's a patented comfort technology, and it's built to instantly adapt to your body. It's this grid. They sent me like a sample of the actual grid that's inside the mattress, and it's amazing. It's like soft if you poke at it, but if you lay something on it, it's really supportive. So for your elbow, it's soft, but for your whole body, it's supportive. This is what you want, and it feels amazing to play with. The mattresses are designed with over 2,800 open air channels, and so they're naturally temperature neutral, this gel, so you'll never sleep too hot or too cold with a Purple mattress. Like I said, it's soft where you want it, firm where you need it, cool all over. It is a mattress that does it all. Then you can count on resting easy each night, year after year, because the ultra-durable Purple grid won't sink or lose shape. In fact, they are so confident in what they do that every Purple mattress comes with free shipping and free returns and a risk-free 100-night trial. So experience the next evolution of sleep. Go to purple.com/MGG and use promo code MGG. For a limited time, you'll get $150 off any Purple mattress order of $1,500 or more. That's purple.com/MGG with promo code MGG for $150 off any mattress order of $1,500 or more. Terms apply, of course, and our thanks to Purple at purple.com/MGG, promo code MGG, for sponsoring this episode. All right. I promised some tips, John, and Patrick has one to deliver. This is more of a troubleshooting tip than anything else, but that's what we do here. Patrick writes, he says he has a very capable MacBook Pro, a 15-inch 2019 MacBook Pro. And he says, but the screen flickers and it drives me crazy. He sent us a video, and sure enough, it's got like this, this little flicker that's showing. Usually it would be a sync issue or something like that, but that's never good, right? He says, I called Apple support and they didn't really have an answer and suggested that I mail in my computer. It's about 7 months old and they would fix it. But I looked online, and I'm not the only person with this issue. I did a few suggestions that I found online, but the only thing that worked for me was to turn off automatic graphics switching in the Energy Saver system preference panel. Although it says that will hurt my battery life, currently it's a must do, and there it is. And he says it's disappointing Apple won't fix this. Well, I think the issue there is that this is in fact a hardware problem. I will say to you, though, and your mileage will almost certainly vary. I hate having to not have my computer for a couple of days. My son had a weird issue with his MacBook Air the lower left corner of it, John, was cracked. And it looks like it was cracked by the hinge itself. Like, I don't know how it would have happened. Maybe it took a fall or something, but it was like the shape of the mark of the crack was like an indent of the corner of the MacBook Pro, or the MacBook Air rather, which is weird, but that's what it was. And so he, did his thing and called Apple and talked to them about it. We do have Apple Care Plus on that machine, and they were like, "Yep, just send it in." So he did that this week. He called last week on Thursday. They shipped him a box. The box arrived on Friday, but we figured since we had to touch it, we'd just leave the box over the weekend. So we just left the box alone over the weekend. And then on Monday, we packed it up and sent in a request for UPS. Like Monday night, we really packed it up, sent in a request for UPS to pick it up the next day because that's what Apple told us to do. It left on Tuesday. Apple got it on Wednesday, and Apple shipped it out on Wednesday. It was back here by midday Thursday. So we were really only without the computer for about 48 hours, obviously. And that has been our typical experience with Apple mail-in support, is they really do try to turn it around the exact same day they get it. It doesn't always happen that way. We've had a computer there for a week. So there's no guarantee of this. And I'm sure that, I would hate to hear about one of you that expected it to be 2 days and it turned out to be 9. But our experience with it has been more often than not, it's, the day they get it is the day it's being shipped back to you, and it's all overnight. So I swear by Apple's mail-in support. I've had way better luck there than I have with Genius Bars over the years. The Genius Bar, if it has to be shipped out and you do it via the Genius Bar, it's a mess because no one really owns the repair. Technically, in Apple's system, the Genius Bar owns the repair, but once they no longer have it, it's out of sight, out of mind. They don't think about it. They don't check up on it. So if you think it's anything that would need to be sent in, do it. Just call AppleCare directly and do it that way. That's my advice. So, and great tip about the GPU as well. I mean, if you're having that problem and you have the discrete GPU, switching to them would be the trick. John, I have a feeling you have something to add.
Yep, but I already added in our notes here. I found this a handy tool to use if you have a machine with multiple graphics cards, and it's called Graphics Cards Status, and it will let you try to force which graphics chip is being used. Sure. And it also gives you the status, which I thought was kind of cool. Like one day, one of our pals, Dan, posted a mathematical model that you loaded in a browser. And it was funny because I clicked on the link to it, and all of a sudden my machine said, "Hey, I'm using the heavy duty GPU." And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that a web page could force that behavior, but apparently it can. Sure.
Yeah. If it's going to load something that needs to do lots of math. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a 3D model that you could rotate but apparently, yeah, you can tell the browser or some plugin to, engage warp drive.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, that's pretty cool. Huh. My chair's gotten squeaky, John. It might need to be replaced in quarantine.
WD-40 worked for me.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the trick, isn't it? It's probably easier and cheaper.
I just had to find where to put the WD-40. That was the challenge.
The trick. Yeah, I hear the sound. I know like where it's coming from. I just need to do it. I've been rejiggering everything in the studio. It's like my bandmates, when they can come back over, they're going to be shocked that everything's different. But the chair will be the same. So we don't want to have to change the chair on them, John. All right, let's go to listener Bob. And Bob tells us, we were talking in the last episode about how just my personal preference is to do things the old way in terms of multiple monitors and have one monitor, one space for all monitors. So disabling the default of different spaces per monitors. And Bob says, if you ever have two very dissimilar monitors, you will likely find that separate spaces makes a lot more sense. He says, for years, I had a 27-inch iMac, effectively a 2-inch monitor, the non-Retina iMac. Okay. Yep. And that's right. Sorry, 2-inch. Did I say 2-inch? I did. He has a late 2009 27-inch iMac, which is a 1080p, effectively a 2K monitor. Not a 5K monitor, because a 1080p screen is 1980 pixels across. So that's effectively 2K, right? That's kind of how those measurements work. And he says, and I also had a 24-inch 1080p monitor. The pixel densities were so dissimilar that if I split a window across both, it was really weird. Yeah, I can totally see that. Yep. And he says, today I have that same 24-inch 1080p, but the iMac has been replaced with a 32-inch 4K monitor driven by a MacBook Pro. And the dissimilarities are even worse. In both situations, separate spaces made more sense for me, and I like the menu bar on each monitor anyway. Yeah, for sure. I can totally see that. Yeah, it makes sense. And then with regards to the self-relocating docks that also was part of that same discussion, listener Bill chimed in and he says, I'm unlike you. He says, I do like the menus on each monitor. It's much less scrolling. I get that. I really treat my monitors as one main one and one auxiliary. If I was truly doing like work and living on the second monitor, I can totally see where I would want a menu bar and I would want the dock to follow me and all of that. And that's kind of where Bill goes with this. He says the moving dock moves by itself, and I have no idea how to control it. He says, I used to use a dock on the left side of my screen, but when I bought the 27-inch iMac and I repurposed my former twin 24-inch displays from my Mac Pro to bracket the iMac, I suddenly had a lot of screen real estate. And this forced me to use the dock on the bottom because I didn't want it only on the very left of my leftmost display or only on the very right of my rightmost display. And I can see that too. I do like my dock on the left, but again, I'm not spending a lot of time, all the way on the right of my rightmost screen where I have to come all the way back to grab the dock. So he uses the bottom, and now the dock sort of follows him around depending on which display he's on. So very, very interesting. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that perspective. It actually makes me rethink, like if I do set up a workflow where I want to have a thing there, that I can totally see where having the, giving up the 22 pixels of my menu bar would potentially be helpful. I don't know. You do it the same way I do still, John, right? I have everything on my higher resolution screen, the dock and the menu bar. Yeah. Okay. And you uncheck the box to do separate spaces per display, right? Yeah.
I think we checked that the other day. Mm-hmm. Yes. As far as I know.
That's right. We did that last week.
That's how it's set up.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
My brain just knows, okay, if you want to make a menu bar choice, you
go left,
go to the other monitor.
Or go right, whichever yours is. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Cool. All right. A couple more tips that have come up. Jeff had emailed us with a question about how his router, I think it was his Eero, was complaining that it was in double NAT mode. And it was actually causing him some problems. Double NAT doesn't always cause problems. In fact, more often than not nowadays, it's fine. And double NAT means you have two routers stacked below each other. So, in his case, he has an Eero and then that's below something else, like not just a cable modem. But he was convinced that he had turned off bridging, or he had turned on bridging, essentially turning off routing on his gateway cable modem device so that it should just pass through and the Eero should be the only router. But the Eero was complaining that it was not. Here's what he shares. I had changed from Comcast for business to Xfinity for consumers a few months ago to get gigabit speeds at a quote unquote affordable cost. Pretty much the same that I was paying for 150 megabits down with Comcast Business gets me a gigabit down and 40 megabits up with Xfinity for residential. He says, our contract is up and they didn't want to deal on the gigabit speeds with a business plan. Anyway, he says, while the tech was here, we set up the Xfinity modem and placed it in bridge mode, even though he wasn't happy about it. I have Eero Mesh and I wanted that to do my routing. Long story short, I watched as he put it in bridge mode. We set up the security cameras and all was working. Yeah, I guess it was the security cameras that were not happy being in double NAT mode. He says, after that, I never checked the modem settings and I just assumed that the settings had stayed the same. Somehow, over time, that Xfinity modem had gotten switched from bridge mode and was causing the double NAT with my Plex issue. Ah, yes, that would be it. He says, I changed it back and things seem to be working now. So the takeaway here, and I have seen this, if you have a device that is not just a cable modem, if it's one of those residential gateways or whatever, and for whatever reason you don't want it to be your router, you want to put it in bridge mode, do so. But I have seen them change on their own, probably related to some software updates, John, I would think, but definitely be aware of that. And so I will say, if you have one of those devices, every 6 months, put it on your calendar to just go in and check and make sure it's still in bridge mode. And that way, you're not going to run into some weird problem down the road when it decides to change that. So thank you for the reminder, Jeff. It's a good one. You don't have a gateway device, right, John? You just have a cable modem?
Right.
Okay. So this wouldn't affect you or me because we run straight cable modems here. So, yeah.
And it's plugged right into the Eero. So.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, even with a gateway device, you'd plug that directly into your Eero as well. Or into your router or mesh or whatever it is. So, yeah. Another good heads up comes in the form of a problem diagnosed. There was a listener, John, was pointing out that he was working with someone that had actually working with several clients that had this Chrome search redirect plaguing their browsers, where they would launch in either their homepage or when they did a search, it would redirect through some alternative layer on top of Google. And he says that my daughter was one of the ones affected having this problem on her Mac Mini, running up-to-date High Sierra and can't get rid of it taking over her default search browser. She went through lots of different troubleshooting steps, ran malware bytes, didn't seem to fix it. But what did fix it is profiles. I always forget about profiles. If you go into System Preferences and you see that there is an option for profiles there, and as an aside, I highly recommend in System Preferences, go to View and organize alphabetically, because my brain does not remember Apple's layout, but alphabetically works. Or you can just go to the View menu and choose things alphabetically there too. If profiles is there, it means there is a profile installed on your Mac. Generally, profiles are used for, enterprise management of a Mac, but they can be used for other things, and they are a common attack vector for these types of takeovers. And go look in there, and if you find one there that you don't think should be there, remove it. And that's what listener John did on his daughter's machine and solved the problem. So don't forget about profiles. That's the takeaway, at least as far as I have it, John. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, from what I recall, because I've set up through OS X server, I actually do have a couple of machines under control, and I do have profiles. The thing is, from what I recall, Dave, maybe just to educate the family, is that I can't remember the last time I was asked to install a profile and it didn't ask for a password. So from what I recall, now in the with all the dialogues coming up, sometimes people will just ignore them and say, yeah, sure, you want authorization. Okay, fine. Sure. And not know why. And I'm sure that happened in this case.
Yeah, that's commonly what happens. You're installing something, and usually that's how these Trojans get on there, is you're in the midst of doing some installation that you're intending to do, and they've sideloaded a thing, and it's like, oh yeah, all we got to get them to do is approve. But they already know they're in the installer mindset. So, yep, that's usually the issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Every now and then, just for kicks. So here's a good way to attract malware if you're into that sort of thing, because then you can play with it.
Yeah.
Like a cat plays with a mouse.
Sure. Sure.
But search for an episode of a popular show, and you will almost guaranteed get a thing saying, hey, your flash has to be updated, or your video player has to be updated. And it's like, okay.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes I'll even download them when I try to run them. Either Little Snitch comes in or Apple's stuff.
Right.
Will say, hey, this has the signature of something that's bad, so I'm not even going to let you
Bad news. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. All right, cool. That gets us through most everything here today. I don't want to go too deep into another topic because here we are. I do want to take a minute and thank all of our premium contributors, all of you that have sent in your contributions or had your contributions auto sent in the last couple of weeks here. And so I'm just going to go through the list. We have several ways of contributing. There is the monthly subscription, which is a default of $10, but you can set it to whatever amount you want. And then there is the every 6 months that, again, default of $25, but you can set it to something else if you like. And then you can do a one-time payment. And all of these come straight to us. You can use Apple Pay for them. And it really is your way for those of you that want to and can. And I totally understand that you might not want to. I also understand that you might want to and cannot. And that's okay, too. Like it's, by listening to the show, that's the best thing you can do. Truly. Listening to the show is really and I realize we all get something out of it. 5 new things at least. But listening is great. Telling other people about the show is great. Visiting our sponsors. And then if you decide to buy, that's also fine. But our job is to pique your interest, not convince you to spend your money there. It's up to them to convince you that they are the right places to spend your money. So all of that helps. And then our premium program is a huge part of it, but don't feel like you have to participate. This is truly voluntary in every sense of the word. In fact, it was created because you folks asked us to create it, and we resisted for a really long time. But anyway, that's how it works. You can find out more at macgeekgab.com/premium. And our thanks to, in no particular order, Barry, who normally is up in the air, but I think right now Barry is in Des Plaines. So thank you, Barry. Jeff from Chesterton, Indiana, David from Plainsboro, Jim from Harvard, Frank from Tunbridge, Clive from Burgess Hill, Scott from Bourbonnais, David from Mount Prospect, Matthew from Forked River, Michael from Robbins, Dave from Saugerties, Timothy from Coralville, Ken from Honolulu, Ian from Cardiff, or maybe Ian from Cardiff, if you're a big Mythic Quest fan. They did that fantastic episode. If you didn't watch episode 10, the one that they did from quarantine, all on iPhones, highly recommend. Fantastic. I forgot that it was them shooting themselves. It was so well done. Best quarantine episode of anything I've seen. Anyway, thank you, Ian or Ian. Simon from Vendrump, Mark from Knoxville, John from Fredericton, John from Wake Forest, Jim from San Jose, Chris from Chorleywood, Harvey from Shoreham, Rick from Traverse City, Corey from Kenmore, Timothy from Hendersonville, and Timothy from West Windsor, Bob from Lepeche, Daniel from Levittown, Bruce from Pascagoula, Tim from Des Moines, sorry, two different spelling, two cities, but Des Moines, sorry. Or Des Moines, is it? I know I'm getting it wrong. One of those is right. Several of them are wrong. Philip from Tucson, Michael from Altadena, Michael from Mission Hills, Ari from Kensington, Art from Pleasant Lake, and Thomas from Gardner. Thank you to all of you. You rock. And John, I think that's going to do it for the show today, unless you've got something else to add, my friend.
Not today.
Not today. Okay. All right. All right. Well, let's see. I'm not going to read reviews today because we just went through all that, but I will read some reviews next time. Please send us your reviews to macgeekgab.com/reviews. Oh, and if you don't yet have the free Mac Geek Gab app, you can go download it at easy for me to say, at macgeekgab.com/app. And that's for your iPhone, your iPad. You can go get it. You get notifications when the show's out. You can obviously listen to the show there. And even the audio live stream is there too. Of course, if you want to take part in the video live stream, well, in that you can watch it and chat along with everyone else and us, we are streaming live every week when we record the show on both Facebook and YouTube. And they seem to be working quite well. So now that I think we've got it mostly sorted out. So it's fun and kind of gives you something to watch while we're doing our thing here. So, and people to chat with. It's great. So we gotta redo the live.macgeekgab.com page, John, to point to all the various different places. Maybe even embed the YouTube live stream at the top of live.macgeekgab.com. That might be an even better way to do it, so that we're not doing the I don't know, right? Maybe there's a thing here, John. I don't know. Do you want to take that project on, Mr. Braun? Quarantine project?
Nope.
Yeah, but you could. You did the last one. Like, that's your page.
No, I'll look at it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. I think we would all appreciate that. That's what I got. We told people how to contact us. We told them, yeah, that's it. We're good. Thank you to all of you for listening. Thanks to all of our sponsors, of course, expressvpn.com/MGG, purple.com/MGG, macsales.com, linode.com/MGG, eero.com/MGG, smilesoftware.com/podcast, barebones.com. And there's more in the mix there that I don't have right in front of me, too. So thank you to everybody. It's awesome. You can go to macgeekgab.com/sponsors if you want to check out the currently active deals. Another one in the can, Mr. Braun. Or here, live stream. Yes?
I think I brought us into this, Dave, so I think you got to get us out of this.
Oh, my goodness. How do I get us out of this? Well, I stopped the recording, but not yet. I hope I haven't. No, I haven't. Good. Still going. I checked off all the agenda items. Oh, one more thing to tell you. Don't get caught.
Made up.